Welcome back to Adobe Premiere Made Easy. This is Chapter 6. In the previous chapter, we used the cross dissolve from the Effects panel. This is highly efficient, especially since it's set as the default transition and can be applied with a keyboard shortcut. However, I find it beneficial to create such an effect manually to understand what's happening behind the scenes. Much of what I cover in this chapter applies to all editing systems, even though we focus on how these functions can be used specifically with Premiere Pro. A crossfade occurs when the end of one clip is overlapped with the beginning of the next, and the opacity is adjusted. Opacity is one of the fixed effects. Every clip you add to a sequence has fixed effects, pre-applied or built in. You can adjust all of these fixed effects in the Effect Control panel. However, the Program Monitor, Timeline panel, and Audio Mixer also offer controls that are often easier to use. The fixed effects include the following: motion, opacity, time remapping, and volume. We covered time remapping in the last chapter, and while this feature can also be used in the Effect Controls panel, it's often better utilized in the Timeline window. Let me quickly demonstrate how to use it in the Effect Controls. This tiny line here symbolizes the speed and is set by 100% by default. It's the equivalent of the line which we can see if we say show clip keyframes with the right mouse click and then go to time remapping and speed. Now we have the same line here. If I push this line up, the speed the clip gets shorter and the speed runs faster. So let me play it. You see, it's faster, everything here. When I pull it down, it's slower, and it reflects here with this line. It doesn't matter if I pull this line up or down or the line in the Effect Controls. And as we did last time, we can also set keyframes and speed ramps. A keyframe is set when I hold the Control key and you see the mouse changes, looks like a pen with a plus, and when I click here, I can set a keyframe, and the same keyframe is reflected here, and the same as we did last time, we can split this keyframe and create a ramp. So if I pull up the part here, the front part, to make it faster, and pull down this part to make it slower, then we create a ramp. You see this ramp is reflected here. And now from fast, it goes to slower with this ramp gradually. We will skip over the volume for now and focus on motion and opacity. So what exactly happens during a crossfade? I have created a sequence here where I'll demonstrate some functions. I've named it 03 test and will delete it afterwards. If you would like to follow along, you should also create a temporary sequence. Now I will drag two clips, Buddha Castle 1 and Aşağıbad Bridge 1, into my test timeline. Let me make some room here. And I grab Buddha Castle 1 and Aşağıbad 1. With holding Control, I can select both clips and pull them into my sequence here. Let me zoom in with plus on the keyboard. And we want to create a transition. Let me pull both clips down here. And to have them overlap, I pull the Aşağıbad Bridge up in the next track with the Alt arrow up. And now I want the transition to be 12 frames, roughly half a second on a 25 frames per second timeline. So I type here -12 to position my playhead exactly here and zooming in. And now I move it to the left Now they're overlapping exactly 12 frames. And you see my playhand, under my playhand, only Airship Bridge is displayed because the opacity of the clip is by default 100%. So we don't see anything what is below. I can change all these values, and you see when I drag it down, you see more and more of the clip underneath. When I pull it to 0, then you see only the clip underneath. To create a smooth transition, I need to change the opacity from 0% to 100% over the duration of the fade. This is done using keyframes. A keyframe is a frame that marks the beginning or end of a change to a parameter. So here at the beginning of this clip, I go to my effect controls, and you see this stopwatch symbol, toggle animation. I click on it, and when I click on it, it creates a keyframe. It's hard to see because it's on the first frame on the very left side here. And now I can set my opacity to 0%. And now I'm jumping to the end of my transition. And at this place, at this frame, I want it to be 100%. So I can set another keyframe. You see, add remove keyframes. And exactly at this position, it created a second keyframe here. And I can change the value to 100%. And now between these two frames, which are the key frames, the opacity will change from 0. You can look at the numbers. I drag it it goes up to 100. And at the same time, you see in the program monitor, the visibility of the clip underneath gets less and less, and the top clip is more and more visible. And now we can do basically the same on the clip below. We go to this spot, and we have to mark to select. You can't effect what you don't select. So we select this clip, and we start the stopwatch, and we say we want 100%, and then at the end of the clip, we want, this clip, of course, we want 0%. So, and you see the symbol here, that's the opacity goes down here, and here the opacity goes up. We could have done it in the timeline by holding control and put a keyframe here and then drag the keyframe up and down. But I personally think it's much more efficient to do that here in the effect controls, but you can do it as you like. And now we have created a smooth transition from one clip to the other. So let's compare that with the effect we used from the effect controls. And let me pull down the same two clips one more time. And this time we use the cross dissolve from the effect control. So I pull the same clips here one more time. I zoom in to that cut point. And what I have to do now is I cut off on each side 6 frames. So I go here, -6, -6, and I place a cut here. I can use the shortcut Control K. I could also have taken this razor tool and cut, but Control K is so much faster. So I cut this part off, and then from here I go +12. So I cut off this part. As we know, Premiere Pro is a non-destructive editing system. So the parts we cut off are not destroyed or thrown away. They are still here. So I can stretch it out again. So they are still here. But what we learned before, that they need to overlap. So I close the gap. There's various ways to close the gap. I can right click and say ripple delete, or I can just with the mouse go and shift delete. That does the same thing. Now we can add our cross dissolve from the effects panel. Here we go to effects, and then we can go to video transitions, dissolve, and pull in our cross dissolve, and we have the same effect which we created manually. And you see how the opacity from one clip goes up and the other goes down to create this transition. And I can also click on the transition, not on the clip, but on the transition. And here my effect controls. Now I see the parameters for the effect controls. And you see the duration of the dissolve is 10 frames. So I can set it to 12 frames because that's what we wanted to have it, half a second roughly. And now it is 12 seconds from the center. If I want it to be longer, let's say 20 seconds, 20 frames, not seconds, frames. So you see there is not enough footage. They are not overlapping enough because I only cut off 6 frames on each side. So the maximum transition I can create with that is 12 frames. Otherwise, if I want a longer transition, I must give the Premiere more handle. So, but basically the transition we have created manually is the same now what we used this effect. And these effects in the effects panel are called standard effects. But today we focus on the fixed effects. Coming back to that effect we use, the cross dissolve, we could have also, instead of, let me zoom in, instead of pulling it over, you remember there's a shortcut because it's within this blue marker that it is the standard default dissolve. So I delete it, and instead I can just hit Control D and it will set the default dissolve. And why it is set to 10 frames, we can adjust this by going to Edit and Preferences and then Timeline. And here we see the default is 10 frames. We can change that. If you want to use longer dissolves by default, then you can change it here to 20 frames, whatever you like, or to 100 frames, whatever you like. I find half a second for a dissolve is a good time. That's why I've set my default duration here to 10 frames. I don't remember what is the default from the Premiere because I've changed it, but I personally like this 10 frames. You choose whatever you like here in the preferences. One more time. Here it's Edit. On a Mac, you go under Adobe Premiere, and then you have Preferences, and then here Timeline, where you find these defaults. Okay. If you have any questions about opacity, please leave them in the comments. I'll move on now to the next fixed effect, motion. Every object you add to a sequence has position data and an anchor point. The X and Y coordinates measured from the center. Let's briefly look at what the coordinate values refer to. If the clip is the same size as the sequence, the coordinates here under motion will be the same as those for the anchor point. The difference becomes apparent only if the clip is a different size. I have here a color field with the dimensions of 1920 by 1080, which corresponds to the full HD in a UHD sequence with dimension of 3814 by 2160. So let's have a look. Reveal in project. You see this is a color mat and it has the dimension of 1920 by 1080, and the sequence size is sequence settings. The sequence size is 3840 by 2160. So this clip is half the size, and now we see the difference in the effect controls, that these numbers are not identical anymore. The x-coordinate under motion shows the value from the center to the left edge of the frame. Increasing this value shifts the image to the right. You see? And decreasing shifts it to the left. And with this arrow, with this crooked arrow, I can always go back to the default settings. The y-coordinate under motion shows the value from the center to the top edge of the frame. Increasing that pushes the clip down. Decreasing lifts it up. The anchor point values are measured from the center to the edge of the clip. When you change the scale, by default, it changes uniformly in all directions from the center, i.e. from the anchor point. But if you click on motion or anchor point, you can see the anchor point here and move it freely, even outside of the clip. So all the changes, for instance, the scale goes from the anchor point. The same with rotation. It's always from the anchor point. Wherever the anchor point is, that's the center of scaling or rotation. So I reset everything here, and we can also snap the anchor point to 9 points when we hold Control. Oh, I'm sorry, I just grabbed the clip, not the anchor point. So it's now you see the mouse has changed. Now I can click and have the anchor point, and holding Control, I can snap it here, 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 in the middle, here. So there are 9 snapping points. So if I want to rotate my object here, when I rotate it now, because the anchor point is on that lower left corner, it rotates from here. Additionally, you can disable uniform scale and, for example, change the height and width independently. So I disable uniform scale. I'm going to move my anchor point, let it snap here. And now if I change the height, it will change from here. You see, it's not uniformly from the middle. You have a lot of freedom, or this width if from the same point. Let me reset everything, reset effect here, and everything is set. Here I can, with one click, reset all the motion effects. With this knowledge, we can now quickly and easily add the zoom effects to the B-roll clips and 3 dialog clips. Let's go to our rough cut sequence. Here we have sequences and 01 rough cut. Now we have this B-roll which we nested. So I double click on the nest and the nested sequence opens. And now we can manipulate all these clips, and we start with the Hungarian parliament, where we have a zoom of, it starts from 0. Now the dissolve is a little confusing. I don't see it well, so I can delete the dissolve and later very easy with a shortcut add it in again. So I delete this dissolve, and here I set my keyframe, position and size, and I want to change my anchor point. So I have to find, now it's the anchor point, because I want to zoom in here. That's where I want to see that dome after I'm zooming in. So I go to the end of the clip with arrow down to the next cut. I delete this dissolve, and here I'm at the end of the clip, and now I go to 180%. And now I can still adjust it. When you click on motion, now you can just move the clip around with your mouse. And I'm gonna move it up a little bit. I push it up and I hold shift so it only, and this is exactly what I want to see. I want to see the street here, but I want to turn it a little bit and give it -0.5, so it's parallel to my frame. So now we've created this zoom effect. Let's go to the beginning of the clip and play it. We sped it up already at the last chapter, so now it's, you see the cars are driving fast. Now the next clip is the chain bridge, and here I want a different similar effect, 180 zoom from the beginning, and I go to the beginning. I set my keyframe, position, scale. Okay, now I jump to the end of my clip. I delete this cross dissolve so I can better see the end of my clip. And I'm zooming in 180. And I want to have that bridge centered at the end, so I move it here. So that's pretty much where I want to end. So we have a nice zoom effect on this clip as well. Let's go to the beginning and play it. You see? It's zooming in. And with this clip, it's the Freedom Bridge, the Szabadság Bridge, or Szabadság Híd in Hungarian. We have split it up in two parts, because the first part, the camera does this zoom, this pan, excuse me. And when the pan ends, I want to start the zoom. And that's where we put that cut. So at the beginning of that second part, where there is no zoom anymore, no pan anymore, I set my position and scale and hit motion, and here is my anchor point, and I want to move that anchor point here because that's where I want to zoom in. So I go to the end of my clip, arrow down, and now I zoom in 150%, and it zooms towards the anchor point. Here's the anchor point, but I can still readjust it a little bit. I want to end here. So now we move out a little bit, zoom out, and we see the pan here ends. And when the camera stops panning, it zooms in. Okay, these were the effects we have in our, I hit Control S to save. You should always save your work. You can say File, Save, or just Control S with two fingers very quickly. Now I close the nested sequence and everything is now changed in our nested sequence, which we have here, and we can play it. The first clips have no pan effect or zoom effect, and now comes the parliament, and you see the zoom effect which we did is now here. I hit, now comes the chain bridge, Landshut in Hungarian. I forgot it last time. I fast forward by hitting L. And here now we have that pan from the camera, and once it stops panning, it zooms in. Okay, that's all we have to do for the B-roll. And now we start with this first clip, where we also want to have a little bit of a zoom. We see that after a while the camera is panning, and before that movement starts, before the camera is moving towards the entrance door, we want to stop our effect. So I go here with my cursor, with my arrows here. That's exactly where I want to place my keyframe. I've selected this clip and I say position and scale at 100% here. And now I go backwards toward the beginning and say, here I want to be zoomed in 150%, and I want to zoom in to me. So I take this anchor point towards the top of my face and zoom in by 150. I'm also setting my keyframe for my anchor point here, and at that position where it ends, I want my anchor point be back normal. So now we have this movement. You see, I'm zoomed in, the camera is zooming out, and now it starts panning. Okay, that's the effect we wanted to have. And now we have two more clips with a little pan. One is this one where we focus on the legs, and we start with 150 zoomed in. And I move the frame a little bit. I want to see the beginning of the stockings, and at the end of the clip we are back to normal. So I just say reset, and now we have set this, and we have this effect here that it's zooming. And that clip was shot handheld, so it's a little shaky, but we're gonna fix that in the next chapter. So, and now we have the second part of this clip, and we do the same thing. We want to zoom in here at the beginning, so setting, position, and scale, 150, and then going to the end, readjust the position a little bit, So we see her cleavage. That's what he said. And now we go to the end and hit reset. So it's going to set the new keyframes, and we have this movement, and it's the same handheld shot. So we're going to slow it down later and stabilize it a little bit. But that's for the next chapter. In the next chapter, we're going to stabilize these shots. Then we're going to look at color grading, and we add the music. And then we're almost done with that tutorial. So thank you very much for watching. Like always, if you liked it, if you learned something, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Hope to see you again in the next chapter. Bye bye.